Okay, here's hoping I can actually get a bit more on track with getting these vlogs done with. And hey, it's time for the premiere of a new Sentai series. Because, as anyone who's watched my show the last year knows, I could not stand Q-Ranger for a variety of reasons, and no, it was not just because of its dumbass idiot Red. Like, the directing was bad, the storytelling was bad. Most of the characters were horribly utilized or had something that assassinated their characters, and frankly, I said I was only going to do vlogs of the first 5 episodes. I did that, but trust me, I had to catch up after people kept telling me the show got better. Fun fact, the show did not get better. It's just that this is the only... I'm restating this as, Lup-patRanger versus favortie, the first versus Super Sentai series, that's an actual TV series and not just a movie, is, well, it's directed by Q-Ranger's head director, Teruaki Sugihara. And the problem with him is his directing style, his directing talents, they've been repeatedly noted and criticized as causing nausea in viewers. And, like, he does a bunch of these small minor cuts that destroy the choreography of scenes entirely, like the continuity of them, and you can see continuity errors in them with how they insistently cut, like, jab in. It's like, it is quite horrible. It's like, at this point right now, I've just finished Kamen Blade, and Blade had the same exact problems with its cinematography in the beginning of the show. It's like, and yeah, I just rewatched Blade for the scripting review. That review is, I need to revise the scripts a bit, because I just rushed through a first run draft, and it's like, but those are coming next year, just for anybody who's keeping track of those kinds of things at the moment. Anyways, yeah, it's the same, like, nausea, disconcerting, sickening vibe from a lot of the direction, which does not help things at all. And the problem is, you would not have these problems if you just lingered even 1 second more on each scene where you cut. And it's like, it's everywhere. The scenes are too close in. He stops it and slows it down and then speeds it up, and it's like, that's the simplest way I can describe it. It inflicts nausea on the viewer as there's all this stuff that's going on. It's too much information to process, or for a brain, not even information to process. It's not being presented coherently. I'm having difficulty describing it because I'm having difficulty describing what the actual sensation it causes is. But yeah, it's just horrible when you can't even watch something with this. Like, when Power Rangers adapts Q-Ranger, I'm going to have this exact same damn problem with the stock cinematography, because, oh god, did Q-Ranger cause that. Again, it was just something I didn't comment on when I was originally talking about Q-Ranger, those 5 episodes I did before I watched the show, because there was so much else wrong that, that pretty much took a back seat. But here, it's like, why did you not catch this with this guy? He has no other previous directorial training. How did you miss this? Otherwise, with favortie versus Lup-patRanger, it's not a great start to the series. I'm hoping the second episode will countenance the failings. It is overly focused on the Lup-patRanger. Barely anything is done with the favortie, but I'm hoping that because it's a versus series, they swap between who focuses on each episode. They said that was what they were going to do in the preview information for the series, but they could so easily screw that up. Past that, the characters themselves are a bit of a mixed bag. Starting off with the Lup-patRanger, since they are the focused characters, they definitely have a stylistic flair to them with their Phantom Thief costumes and how they invade the enemy faction to steal back treasures that were stolen from their benefactor, a descendant of the original Arsene Lupin. They are the Lup-patRangers. They are trying to recover the Lupin collection from the enemy faction known as the Gangler, and they are actually They are not any way related to Arsene Lupin himself, but a descendant of Arsene Lupin has tasked them with doing that. So they're kind of thieves in training, the best way to describe it. Granted, Lupin Red, Kairi Yano, and Lupin Blue, Toma Yoimachi pretty seem to have their... I want to say eyes on the prize, but that's not the exact right thing. They give off the vibe they know what they're doing. Umika Hayami, Lupin Yellow, however, is a complete ditz. No. 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 It's like, this was one of my concerns with the series, that they were going to make either Lupin Yellow or Patron Sango the stereotypical girly girl, and they're not doing that exactly, but they are kind of making her out to be the dumb one of the six. Like, over with the toku, Patron Ichigo, Keiichi, or Asaka is the stereotypical no-nonsense police officer that doesn't like the Phantom Thief Lupin Ranger because they're thieves. They are breaking the law even though they're stealing from criminals, so yeah, he dislikes them on principle, and we don't exactly get the best opinion of him, because basically he's... How should I describe his character? He's basically Gunpachiro Ota from Kamen Rider Drive, but with years less of experience. Now, hopefully when the toku have focus next time, which I'm hoping they do, they should, or at least by episode 3, minimum of episode 3. If you're just continuing to set up the series in the next episode, it would be good to focus on them, but you definitely need to do it by the 3rd episode to not completely start screwing over the show and have it even more slanted in the Lupin Ranger's direction. But yeah, he is the no-nonsense cop that gets goofed on and kind of outsmarted by Kairi as the two encountered each other in the episode in human forms when Keiichiro was angered that how everybody's appreciating the Lupin Rangers' efforts in defeating the monster faction of the week when that is actually their job to do it and catch both of them. So it's kind of setting up a good dynamic that, honestly, between them does remind me of Lupin the Third and Inspector Oda. So, not Oda, Zenigata. Sorry, I was thinking I was on the wrong tangent. Yeah, so it is coming up as a Lupin and Zenigata dynamic between them, but you still have to make, though you're not exactly getting the right kind of gruff off that makes him appealing in that he understands, like, the Lupin Ranger aren't the worst things in the world, but he still has to go after them to arrest them on principle. We're not exactly at that point yet where we get that idea that's the dynamic between them. Like, there's no sign of actual mutual respect, and it's goofball versus authority figure kind of thing yet. It's not there yet, but it's close. We're seeing a beginning of a dynamic, and because it's the beginning of a series, that is fine for the moment. Sayaka Hikawa is the one that's kind of the naive fan of the Lupin Ranger, meaning he thinks they can potentially work together, and Tsukasa Myojin, again, Patron Sango, is... I actually don't have much of a beat on her character yet, but she seems to be diligent towards her job from what's presented. Like, not exactly breaking the rules, but yeah, I don't have a good read on her yet. But yeah, that's all the main characters. The only one I'm having an issue with is Umika, and I usually do have issues with the Sentai member that's unusually incompetent, and especially if they do it to the girl characters, because, come on, that's just adding insult to injury in a lot of respects. I would prefer it if they did a show completely without the idiot character and, them all having their specialty, but when the Lupin Ranger go after the second monster of the episode, that is another way in how the show is faltering immediately. They're running through the monsters pretty damn fast. And when they go after the second monster of the episode, Umika almost screws them up because she sees a spider in there, and in the air duct they're hiding in, and air ducts do not work that way, but that's inconsistent with all kind of thief fiction, so I'm not going to fault the episode for it, for that little bit of the detail, but she almost screws up and reveals their presence early by seeing the spider and screaming. And okay, that's not exactly the most unusual thing in the universe, because there are a lot of people that are freaked out by spiders, but it's the rest of the presentation where she's kind of complaining, bitching of their day job that they're not helping her with the wait staff in the bistro restaurant the three run, even though they have a split of duties between them. In the management of the restaurant, Toma is the cook, Umika is the waitress, and Kairi buys the supplies. That is pretty evenly presented. So, and while Kairi is delayed in getting back with the supplies, it's for a logical reason, in that he was directly contacted by their immediate benefactor, Kogure, who is their middleman in their duties of recollecting the pieces of the Lupin collection that as I said, the monsters of the series, the Gangler, have all stolen. And he pretty much just gives them their orders, their targets, their tasks, and, it would make sense for one person of the group to be the contact for that, for both returning pieces of the Lupin collection and getting their next assignment. Along with them buying all of their supplies, it does seem like a pretty even balance of the workload, considering Kairi has to do the better footwork, Tuma has to focus on cooking things, and Umika, in comparison, kind of has the easiest job of the three. So it's unusual for her to be complaining outside of them having a full house, which they didn't even have. So, yeah, I'm not liking her initially, as she just seems like they're writing to a cliche with her, and that might be revealed to be a wrong first impression, I will admit that. But it's like, there's always one per season. There is always one per season. I would like for... I'm hoping that Tsukasa, and yes, I am aware we have the Commoner Decay jokes in the waiting for that, because it's the pink Sentai member named Tsukasa. Too much pink energy is dangerous, yada, 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 all that stuff coming. Seems to be the more serious and experienced one to do. And considering we only usually get that with Pink Rangers when there isn't another female member on the team, actually, strike that. We usually always have a split between the girly girl and the serious girl between the two, but it's usually the pink one that's the girly girl and the yellow one that's the more serious one of the two, unless there's only one girl on the team. That's my that was the caveat on that. Okay, Kyoryuger also had the exception on that, but Yayoi counted as an extra ranger, so... Anyways, yeah, I'm hoping Tsukasa, once we get more sight of her character, balances her out. Because I gotta say, on the characterization front, I'm thinking I might end up liking the Patranger more. It's gonna be an interesting tangle of who ends up winning that contest, because if you screw up too much with one side, you're gonna end up leaning towards another group than you would think you would. The Gangler also are not standard villain affair, which, thank God, after last season, after it was revealed Jark Matter's big boss, his whole plan was to destroy the universe to reset it into its own image. That whole cliche. So, it's like, you're kind of being predictable with that one. This is not being predictable. The Gangler are led by an entity known as Dogranio Yaboon, and he is 999 years old as of the first episode, and he is looking to retire from the head of the interdimensional crime group Gangler. I don't know if it's actual interdimension, across dimensions, or if it's just meant to be across space and time kind of interdimension. But yeah, he's looking to retire, and the being in the entire organization that will succeed him as the new crime boss, who he will officially recognize, is the entity that manages to take over the Earth. Now, I like this. I very much like this. We are finally getting away from the we will destroy X because X reason, or we will have conquest. You know, the Doctor Who quote, you don't really want to take over the world, you wouldn't know what to do with it beyond shout at it. No, taking over the world is just an interim goal. It's like, we haven't really had that since Gokaiger, whereas taking over the Earth should have been just a footnote for Zangyak in their quest to dominate everything, and just got the stopgap because, our special blue ball planet was protected by a bunch of Sentai teams. Go Busters had want to take over the world because X reason. D-Boss in Kyoryuger was a world destroyer for his boss that wanted to make everything in his image, aka playing to a bit more of a cliche, but that was just an interim. That was just the final part of it. The focus of the show was just D-Boss members doing things to revive him because he was seen as infinitely more powerful. So that was a goal off in the distance kind of thing. Zet wanted the light to be bathed in its splendor, so it wasn't too a cliche, but everything else was a cliche with the interim rest of his... Okay, I shouldn't really call it a cliche because it wasn't really cliched in how they were executing things, but they wanted the darkness to swallow the light, and that is a cliche. But, Zedok himself didn't really want that. He just wanted its brilliance for himself, and because of Yasuko Kobayashi tropes, he never got his chance at it or recognized the darkness. The darkness can only... light can only shine if darkness is there to give it brilliance. It's like... would have been nice had he been allowed to realize that by its end. Ninja was just a combination of destruction and conquest. It fell back to tropes. Zoojer, I admit, didn't play the cliche either. It was all just a game. Okay, the game thing is cliche in and of itself, but it was like entertainment for the big boss in a bunch of games, and the Zoojer were just opposing players to see if the monster would do it. So, okay, we have had some variants in the last few years, but this feels like something that hasn't been done to death by Sentai in varying stages. Like, I can't remember the last time we had an actual, crime syndicate as the, big bads of the show. I think the last one was toku-ranger that did that kind of thing. Otherwise, they've just been entities of destruction or absolute conquest. So, I'm liking them. The designs of the monsters, though, they're really odd. I don't know what to think of them yet. It's like they're a bit over-detailed, almost. I mean, I think a bit of a simpler design would have been better. I mean, the generals are Destra Maggio and Gocheru Meadow, and it's like, Destra is a bunch, like, watermelons combined with grenades, and it's like, it looks so strange, and Goche is a female doctor who looks like a dinosaur and has bone boobs. Seriously. So it's like, I think you're overdoing it a bit in the design aesthetic. So, her design is based off an Obi-Raptor and a machine gun. Machine gun makes even less sense. And her voice actor is Lifa from Sword Art Online. This does not make her appealing to me at all, because I do not like Sword Art Online. But yeah, I think they're overdoing it with the design aesthetic. The thing I think works for them, though, is the safe each of them has that holds the Lup-patRanger in it, as that's the next aspect of the show. It's going to be a collect-a-thon to recover these treasures, and as my associates in Tokusatsu reviewing and information providing have already revealed, a bunch of the Lupin collection pieces are Super Sentai toys. I'm not kidding. If you guys go back and watch the episode, you can pretty much put down a list of various things you can see in the scene. First ones we immediately saw were the morph embrace from Go Busters. I could have sworn there was an unpainted Gabu revolver in that scene. There's the Gokai Cellular face down, a toy copy of Geki Bat, a spineless Stagochi, pieces of various individual Super Sentai mecha. People saw that they might have used the molding of the lion origami and one of the cube animals to make two of the well, like they're in the same shape as them. They didn't actually use a actual mold of it, but to make this dice gambler thing and a lighter, it's like it's a smorgasbord of inside references with all of that, and it's like it's. I'm wondering what the prop department was thinking with that. If they were thinking these could just be discarded pieces, but then again, something you see in one moment and then don't ever see again in the show. But then again, the first two episodes, not even the first two episodes, the first episode showcased two of those from the collection immediately fall into the group's hands. Like, the first one they recovered was the gambling dice manipulator. The second one, with the second monster of the episode, had fire powers from the lighter it had in its torso. So, we'll see how that goes from there, and how much we'll actually see of that. Or maybe they meant to do that so they can, like, re-release these items as additional collectibles or toys, which I would not be that opposed to. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time Bandai has done that kind of thing. Hell, in the ye olden days, Bandai of America would slightly remold, recolor a previous Morpher for re-release as part of the toy line battleizer. I know they did that a couple times with the Disney years, where a remolded version of the Ninja Storm Morpher was used as the battleizer Morpher, and they remolded the what did they call Deca Break's counterpart in SPD? SPD, not Nova Ranger, that was his other counterpart. Yeah, they remolded his brace for his battleizer, and then they did the Solar Knights Morpher redone into the Mystic Red's battleizer. But it feels like they might Bandai of Japan might be trying that out, since they've kind of been doing that a bit the last couple years. I know Excite had two different remolds of the O's Metal Holder, and there's actually going to be a new version of the O's Metal Holder being released through Premium Bandai for the complete selection modification O's driver, which I'm so excited to be getting in a couple months. But that's neither here nor there, but I feel that might be what they're going to end up doing with a few of these, to just boost the toy line, because honestly, they're kind of Spartan for the year on this, as even though they're doing two types and they're going to have the expected limb change system, it doesn't seem like there's going to be that variety. Both teams just has the same type of Versus changer, with whatever one they're transforming into compensated with the toy that becomes the Megazord pieces, and then a handheld weapon for both teams that kind of doubles as a second mode. Like the Paddle-Ranger have this microphone thing that turns into a baton, and the Lupin-Ranger have this sword thing that has a grasper claw on the opposite end. So they're probably going to need a bit more variety than whatever's going to end up showcased in the Megazord configuration creating things. Granted, the Versus Changers are pretty freaking cool. They're just a basic gun that, depending on the way the team twists them, can either do a upright fighter jet configuration or a downloading vehicle configuration with other things that can attach either way, and they use the exact same type of pin system that the toku and Kamen Drive and Kamen Build have used. So I have really liked that pin system, so I'm glad Bandai is continuing to make use of it, as it must be pretty easy to program for their collectible toy gimmick stuff, so I'm glad to see it, frankly. But yeah, what really made me on the fence with this episode on whether it's good or bad really was the awful direction and the questions on how they'll deal with all the team and character stuff, because they could so easily overfocus on one team and invalidate the other, which won't be to the show's merit. And it's like, and the direction, oh god, there was the ending battle against the second monster of the episode, Garret Nago, who ends up having fire powers thanks to the frigate. It's like so much spinning, so much intercutting in the spinning, so much slow down, start up, speed up. It's like, what are you doing? What are you trying to convey that you can't just make it? I don't even know how to describe how to make it better beyond just presenting it in order, in a linear fashion. I don't even want to say linear because that would not help with all the spinning, but you had to consistently slow it down so it didn't look like a bunch of erratic shaky cam. Oh, and all of it was shaky cam too. It's like, how did you get hired if you were this incompetent at your job? Ugh. Yeah, episode pretty much ends with both of the teams kind of set up and them engaging each other after the favortie finally get their changers to actually face everything. Oh, one other thing I did not address yet. Commander Hilltop, the commanding officer of the favortie, he's a black dude. I am totally fine with this. And, you know, what I'm getting from the immediate beginning of the episode, or not episode, beginning of the series, is I think Commander Hilltop is involved with Koguro, the mentor of the Lup-patRanger, and they're kind of like, they're intentionally setting each side against each other to help them improve and like cover another base. It's like, I feel it's kind of a conspiracy that's resulting in the two sides not exactly facing off, but competing to get all these collection pieces out of like people's hands. It's like, it feels like it would be a natural development from how the favortie gets items that the Lup-patRanger recognize as being from the Lupin collection like that. Unless, you know, they were confiscated from the Lupin collection earlier and Lupin just left it in police hands, which doesn't seem like a very Lupin thing to me. So I feel there is something more going on behind the scenes with that, which will eventually lead to both sides, after they've gotten enough mutual respect of each other at the very least, to actually come together as one team, especially since we have the Lupin X and Patron X Ranger, aka the sixth, because he's technically seventh, Ranger of the team, where he can swap between both states. So that would make sense if the one doing that were actually in concert with both sides, and if Kogure and Hilltop are secretly working together to just take down the Gangler from both sides of the conflict. Like, the Lup-patRanger are technically deputized secret agents or undercover officers with respect to everything. That would kind of fit, wouldn't it? I'm just wild mass guessing on what's been presented. One other thing this episode doesn't really deal with is the Lup-patRanger's origins. Like, this is definitely another directorial and storytelling issue that's carried over from Q-Ranger, where that they half-ass and hand-wave backstory details with intent that you seem that they will follow up on, but then could potentially decide, no, this one half-assed 10-second moment is more than enough to justify an entire character and your relationship with them. No, don't do this. They did this with how the Lup-patRanger were first assembled, and that is just bad storytelling if you don't actually spend more time with it. I'm hoping they don't do that, but the bar has been set so low that I'm not discounting that possibility. Now, I've spent half hour talking about Lup-patRanger and its setup details, as build this week doesn't exactly have a lot to it. I mean, it has stuff to it, but it's like not a lot to recap because it's just one episode long fight scene for the sake of Toto and Hokuto between Sento and Sawatari, with the interim danger being the whether the hazard trigger is going to drive Sento crazy again, and spoilers, it does. Which means the 7-part YouTube raising the hazard levels miniseries is kind of pointless, aside from introducing new forms if Sento doesn't actually learn how to master the hazard states in that miniseries. Admittedly, there's interim drama about Sento giving Misora a kill switch for the hazard trigger, which will entirely destroy his driver if he just goes berserk and looks like he's going to kill Sawatari, because he's still traumatized over killing Sawatari's friend Shuya last week. Technically, it was last week in the show, because it's been 7 days since the events that caused a bunch of fallout. Technically, it's been 2 weeks since then, actually, but, it was since it's been a week since Sento kind of started to get himself back together, and then he spent 7 days training with the hazard trigger and the bottles taken from Sato and Hokuto to, prepare himself and raise the hazard level so he could control the hazard trigger. Didn't work out. And in fact, the YouTube series now seems pointless because he used the majority of the Sato and Hokuto full bottle best match combinations that were going to debut in that YouTube series, now in the main series, to fight off Greece. And it's like, okay, you gave them a proper introduction, so you can just swap to using them rapidly in battle, but it feels like you don't need to actually watch that series now, as you now already know what all those best match combinations do. And in fact, it is a pretty shocking plot point for the Sato and Hokuto governments to find that their full bottles, which they entrusted to Bloodstark, are now in the hands of their chief enemy. The man is an absolute steak. You made a Faustian deal and you're regretting it. Because the man runs Faust. I love that. I really love that. So, Sento eventually wins and beats down Greece, but it takes them a full day of fighting, which, appropriate, they'll fight lasting the entire episode, to finally beat him down and make Sento use the hazard trigger, which he finally used at dusk, and we'll give it a credit to the YouTube miniseries that he's clearly fighting for a couple hours in his hazard state before it actually takes him over, because he first transforms at dusk. It is the dead of night, or at least absolute night after the sun is completely set, by the time the hazard trigger finally makes him go berserk. So it's a credit to Greece, too, that he can even fight that long. It's quite impressive that he had absolutely no problems with berserk states before that. So, we don't know. Maybe past this point, Sento won't have to worry about his hazard states going insane in the short term. It's because it's like, we're likely not to see a battle that lasts that long again. So, maybe this has just gotten him past all the short-term uses of it, and it's fighting for long-term, like hour or two in the form that's problematic. Granted, hazard Hazard Trigger form doesn't seem as powerful now that he had to fight Grease off with it for multiple hours, because you would think that the second he would use it, like before, it would just be pushing the win button. It was not. So we're gonna have I feel like we're gonna have a logical disconnect where Hazard Trigger gets owned absolutely in short-term battle, or Sento reverts back to having his Berserk state happen right after using it, even though logically he shouldn't, since he lasted that long with it. Something else I did like about this, which we knew was coming, was him swapping from Rabbit Tank Hazard to Hawk Gatling Hazard. It's like they just swapped out the faceplates, which we knew was going to happen, but I liked how they dealt with it, where they just had it smashed back down, and yet no different, just eyepieces difference. And again, I like this. I like hazard states, but you're already on form overload. You really don't need any more. And then, of course, is the revelation that Rabbit and Tank Hazard are coming, that those are based off of a new power-up, which is not going to matter much when he gets to Genius form, which I've also seen information for. I'm waiting until we actually see it in the show. The first peek art detailings for these forms never exactly look good, so best to wait and see until it actually shows up in the show. Like, people complained all about the X8 forms, and yet the X8 forms were, the most part, great in that show, so yeah, best to hold off. Past that, though Sento wins the fight, Sato takes over Hokuto, because Hokuto's governor was an absolute idiot from start to finish with all of this, and was easily manipulated, so Sato now controls 2/3 of Japan, so Toto is nowhere near out of danger, and it's just made it easier for everybody else to conquer. So, hey, it looks like Greece will be becoming an ally when we have to face off with Kamen Rider Rogue next week, and we will be discussing Kamen Rider Rogue next week with that episode, hopefully. Amidst this, though, to stop Sento from going crazy again, Ryuga surpasses his own Berserk states with the, Cross Z Dragon... Not Cross Z Dragon, what are we calling his, Splash Driver Dragon form? Like, Cross Z Charge. Yeah, counter Cross Z Charge. Yeah, he has... I didn't mention it in the big recap thing, but basically since he started using the Splash Driver, he could only use it for short periods before he goes berserk, like Sento is suffering with the Hazard Trigger. So the worst case scenario is them having a pair of berserkers that fight until they effectively die. And, you know, that's a bad thing. But because Ryuga was so concerned with how weaker Sento is unless he uses Hazard Trigger, he basically overcame his own limitation for what is effectively his best friend. You know, best frenemy, too, because, you know, he has a hate on for Katsuragi, who was blamed the death on, whose death he was blamed for, and his girlfriend dying because of experiments that Katsuragi originated and all that jazz, and it's like, there's such a complicated relationship there that, though I still feel Ryuka is completely superfluous to the show, because he doesn't do much here that no other character could do, and in fact, you know, we could have had the cliche of Misora rushing onto the battlefield and, you know, grasping, clutching Sento in her arms with his back, her front to his back, and, like, waking him up from that through their feelings for each other, and, you know, we could do that, and yet they decided to do this thing to involve Ryuga in the show, and like I said, everything he does could technically be done by another character. So yeah, the Hokuto invasion arc, which has lasted since episode 16, is now over. And this was episode... What episode was this? 22. 6 episodes for a war invasion arc, and the next part of the war invasion arc is involving Sato. So if that wraps up by the early 30s, I'm really hoping that the last arc of the series is them dealing with an outbreak of Smash and uh, Blood Stark promoting himself to true ultimate villain of the show, because that would make so much more sense, and he's manipulating all sides for his own machinations. I mean, we already know he's doing that, but, have a direction to it that isn't just going to reveal it as, I was the good guy all along, because there's no justification for that in the story so far. People have been promoting that theory now about him, and it's like, there's very little evidence of that, and I don't think they're going to get any more of it with how things are being framed here. So, build's good as usual, but it was just a fight-heavy episode. Lup-patRanger versus favortie, I'm still reserved on, and we'll go from there. I'm thinking the X8 movies are going to be an interesting thing to discuss when those start releasing soon, because their release dates are coming soon, and all that. So, hopefully I will be back to a regular release schedule with these vlogs. I'm, again, sorry we had to waste almost half a year with... Actually, most of a year. No, yeah, half a year with nothing on this, but hey, life. I'll see you all next week.